KROW, who is a great Overwatch 2 YouTuber. I strongly recommend you subscribe to him if you haven't. Just released a team composition guide for all of the heroes in the game. Here is that table of all the heroes and which compositions suit them best. A green check mark means it's their default style. Red X means do not play them with this composition. Orange triangle means playable but not particularly synergistic. Red triangle means counter, as in this hero counters an opposing team using this style. KROW didn't explain how he plays the heroes, so I'm making this addendum to his guide with my thoughts on his placements. A quick explanation on the compositions. So this is in my own words, by the way. Poke lineups have strong long-range damage and generally want fights to last longer for them to get picks. They don't like enemies who can close the distance on them quickly, especially lineups with vertical mobility. Generally speaking, Poke counters Rush but loses to Dive. Rush, also known as Brawl, lineups are durable, close-range fighters who want to steamroll your front line and beat you head-on. They struggle to cross large open areas and deal with mobile heroes. Generally speaking, Rush counters Dive but loses to Poke. Dive lineups are very mobile and can engage when and where they so choose. They're more fragile than other comps and tend to need to create a strong advantage off the initial dive to win fights. Generally speaking, Dive counters Poke but loses to Rush. Alright, let's cover the DPS. So for Genji, red triangle for Poke means he is a great counter against Poke. So I would agree with that. So Genji is very, very strong at dealing with heroes who do not want him to be up close. He's very, very dangerous up close. He's excellent burst damage, right? You're looking at 151, right, with his burst combo, assuming no headshots. So he can instantly kill somebody once they're down to 3/4 health, like most squishies. Deflect is very dangerous at close range. It's really hard to react to it, to understand like when he's going to dive. A lot strong ability to mind game. Double jump makes it really hard for you to hit him, allows him to get over you. His poke down damage, right, just even like the shurikens, is really good against targets that are slowed by scoping. So for example, Ashe, Hanzo, Ana are all slowed when they're scoping. So shurikens, especially getting like double, triple headshots, is very common as Genji, which gives him an opportunity to kill you. So yeah, Genji's commonly picked. That's why you often see Genji selected against like Widows, Hanzos, Ashes, because he's very strong against them up close and he has the ability to close the distance against them. Against Rush, Genji is playable with Rush lineups. So in that situation, Genji's kind of following on the front line, which gives him good access to the back line so you can dive in. The bad news is his team often can't help him on who he's diving. So for example, if he's running like, let's say, Ryan Reaper, they're going to be focusing the opposing tank, not focusing the DPS or support, whomever the Genji's attacking, which is still fine. I mean, it's still some pressure, some space for you, but not as synergized as it would be with dive. Great thing about Rush is that you can step, often the enemy team is trying to burn down your tank to stop the rush. So if you step in front of your tank and pop deflect, you can get massive value that way, build a lot of ult charge, help win sustain, and so forth. Dive, obviously Genji's amazing at dive, super good at close range with deflect, dash, his right click combo, just very, very strong, right? Obviously he can climb vertical space, he can cross gaps, like as long as they're not extremely large gaps, relatively easily. He has the ability to maneuver on off angles, go up side paths, just strong on dive, right? He synergizes well with the dive timing. Echo, super versatile hero. On Poke, Echo does decent ranged poke damage, not super consistent, but against other snipers, anyone who's also slowed, similar to as Genji, Echo can punish them really hard with stickies. So stickies plus try-shot at long range can still result in kills because there's no fall-off damage, which is really, really strong for her. Forces the enemy to have to play safely and kind of creates a little bit of space. And then she can, when she uses copy itself, she can use copy to copy someone who as ranged pressure, right? Copy an Ashe, for example, or Hanzo or a Widow. She can also dive onto the enemy heroes in Poke as well, with flight. She can also find off angles that the enemy are not watching with flight as well. For Rush, Echo is red triangle here, so quote-unquote countering Rush. I think this is reasonably fine. I would agree with this. Pretty much all the Rush heroes, you're looking at the Ramattra, the Rein, the Zarya, the Orisa, you just can't touch Echo. Like literally she flies, and like those are so rough for Rush, because the point of Rush is that you need to have a target that you can focus down and kill, that they cannot evade you. If they can evade you, for example, by flying, there's not a lot that you can do about them, which allows them access to your back line and kill them. It's very common to be like, let's say you run Rein and you kill everyone on the ground, but then the Orisa Mercy flies above you and has killed your whole back line, and now you're just stuck there and you die at the end. For dive, Echo synergizes super well with dive. She's a very low cooldown with flight. She can blow up people with her sticky bombs. Her tri-shot's really dangerous, does a lot of good damage. She's one of the highest damage heroes in the game. Focusing beam, really good at killing a target that everyone else is focusing. And then copy can give her a second life, but allows her to continue the pressure. Super strong in dive. Okay, Farah, poke hero. So this is kind of interesting that how I see that KROW is already considered not a dive hero, which I think is interesting. But for poke, Farah obviously very dangerous at long range, no fall off damage on most projectiles in game, including her rocket. 120 damage per rocket is very dangerous. You have a mercy boosted, now you're doing 150 plus. It's painful, right? As long as they are not at full health, they're pretty much always at in danger of getting one shot by Farah Rocket, and then she can use concussive to close the gap quickly and kill. She's not great, I would say, in standard super long range situations, like you're talking about. Like Havana, for example, because the sightlines are really long and she gets shot out of the air by snipers, and I think that's where she's really good at. But there's lots of like medium range poke situations where I think she's quite viable. For Rush, she counters Rush the same way Echo does. Basically, you stay out of the opposing rushers, and then you just kill the back line, and then you kill the front line, because there's nothing they can reasonably do about flying heroes. For Dive, it's listed here as not playable with Dive. I don't know that I agree with this. I think at a minimum this should be orange triangle, if not green check mark. So I think of Farah as a dive hero, right? You kind of poke them down with your rockets, soften them up, and then you dive in and you go for the kill. Maybe she's kind of like a hybrid hero in that sense, because she can't win fights staying at long range. There's almost no way to consistently get kills, but she must eventually usually commit at some point with concussive. I think the reason why she's probably red X'd for dive here is once she commits, concussive is a relatively long cooldown, and she has no other defensive abilities. So once she's in, and then if you don't win the fight right there, you're gonna lose. Versus like Echo, for example, can copy and get out, conceivably. So I understand this. I don't know that I fully agree with Red X, but it really depends on definitions of what you consider dive. All right, Symmetra. For poke, yeah, I mean her charged right click does 100 damage now. That's pretty dangerous. You two-shot people. You can take funky off angles with teleport that people aren't ready for, and then you can hit them pretty hard with the flank right click. You can spam it pretty well. It splashes. It moves pretty fast. You can definitely farm multi that way. Sim wall, very strong against enemy poke lineups. You can completely shut down the team. You can split them in half, and there's not a lot they can do about it. Splitting a brawl or rush team in half for record like doesn't really do a lot because they're just going to kill you at close range anyway. And splitting a dive team doesn't do a lot because they're mobile, so they can just jump out of it or reposition accordingly. Rush, yep, Sim's classically thought of as a rush or brawl hero. She wants to follow up a strong front line, especially somebody with a shield who can take space away from her. Sim's great when she keeps the left click beam on someone, can build it up to stage 3, and it does 180 damage a second, which is bonkers. It's highest sustained damage of anybody else without a cooldown, as far as I can think of, right? Without ultimate. Bastion does 300, 350, but that requires a cooldown to use. But the left click from Symmetra does not require it, and it even gains ammo back if you're zapping shields. So she's really good against other rush lineups that require the use of a shield, or just a low damage durable tank like Ramatra, for example, where she can be very, very strong if she's just pocketed through it and kill them. Dive, yep, Symmetra's not going to dive, despite I've seen some people on the forum suggesting otherwise, that she actually is playable into dive. Winston's one of the best pulse heroes against her, even though technically she outdamages Winston. She just has a lot less health, so you jump into her, you bubble her off, and then you do a ton of damage to her. If she wants to teleport out, fine, but that usually results in her losing the fight anyway, because wherever she teleports to is usually not somewhere where she can come back in and save the team and add any value. So yeah, she's definitely vulnerable to being focused down and killed, especially since a lot of dive heroes are also very mobile and can fly, and that's all bad news for Symmetra. Okay, next up, Hanzo, classic poke hero, right? Constant threat to one-shot people at any range with his bow. I mean, he's like a projectile sniper. I think it's very straightforward. For Rush, yeah, I think still reasonable here. The big thing that you're relying on for Rush for Hanzo is his Storm Arrows. Storm Arrows is 300 damage pretty quickly, over about a second, and it can headshot, so it can do up to 600 damage. So if you're running, Rhine on Rhine or something like that, and their Rhine starts swinging, you just pop Storm Arrows and you just pop them in the face, and then all of a sudden their Rhine just gets melted. So doable. Yeah, I mean, I would say playable. Not great. Definitely on the lower end of playable, but I think it's playable. Dive, yep, makes total sense. Or Hanzo can climb, but he has no real forward mobility, like other than his dash boost, whatever it's called. Jump leap I think it's called. So other than his leap, which doesn't really go very far, it's really used defensively. He has no offensive mobility that he can use to get to the opposing team and close the gap. And he doesn't even really want to close the gap typically. So he wants longer fights. He wants time to be able to get picks with headshots. So yeah, really bad for dive. Mei. Mei is an okay poke hero, so she's reasonably good at using icicles. Icicles is 150 damage on a headshot, which is dangerous. It moves pretty fast. Once you get used to Mei, you can land headshots with her pretty consistently. You can wall off certain poke angles and turn it into like a 5-on-3 if you wall off like the Ash Mercy, for example. So doable. I think that she's also reasonably strong at like slowing down a dive. I wouldn't say stopping a dive. She's unfocusable, which is great. So she removes one of the possible dive targets for the enemy team. Wall can be used to split up a dive or to isolate them to get kills. The wall could also be used to reposition your team for poking. I don't think she's great. Definitely on the lower end of poke, but doable. And I would say one note is that she's especially strong against Tracer because she one taps Tracer in the head, which forces the Tracer to play very differently, knowing that there's a Mei in the game. So yeah, I mean, okay, definitely okay for poke. For rush, yep, that's what Mei is all about. So Mei is a close range hero, not because of her damage, but because of her wall. Because what she wants is she wants her team to focus off on the enemy tank, and then she wants to wall off the opposing tank and then kill them off very quickly without any help from their supports or DPS. So she typically wants to be played in high damage short range comps like Rhine, Ramatra, Reaper, etc., where she can suddenly, cut off the opposing tank, and then the opposing tank dies. And then her slow is also really powerful at preventing enemy tanks from getting away. Even someone like D.Va, who could theoretically fly away, when the D.Va's being slowed, it's painfully slow for her to escape. And it goes through D.Va Matrix, or spray goes through D.Va Matrix. Dive, yep, obviously Mei can't do anything about dive. She has no forward mobility. Her wall is like sort of helpful on the tiniest amount, but she can't follow her team. She doesn't really do great long range DPS, so this is not, and she has no utility in that space. So yeah, not viable with dive. All right, Torb for poke. So Torb is really, really good at poking, right? He wants to play at long range. He wants to use his turret. His turret's excellent at preventing his team from getting dove. The consistent damage is really hard for maneuverable heroes like flying heroes, Genji, Tracer, who rely on their small hitboxes and mobility to stay alive. The constant 44 DPS from the turret burns them down, which makes it hard for them. They have to think of the turret as like another player that they have to deal with. In order to dive successfully, so really good. Torb himself, completely undivable. His ability to use overload gives him a lot more health and a lot more close range damage. So lots of heroes like Winston get completely melted if they try to jump onto a Torb. So he obviously can defend himself, he can defend teammates, his turret can help against teammates, and his long range damage pressure is really good and can get picks through headshots. So yeah, Rivet gun, pretty good gun, by the way, in case you were not familiar. Left click, quite good. For rush, yep, Torb's okay. He can definitely brawl. Again, he does good DPS. He's durable, so he doesn't die easily. So he can follow your front line in. He can throw down a forward turret too, which is just another annoying thing to have to deal with, especially if you have a shield or something that prevents it from dying easily. Not great, not terrible. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I would say strongly in the middle. Like, I would not hesitate to run him as part of a brawl comp if you needed the turret, for example, to keep a Tracer off your backline as you advanced. Okay, dive. He counters dive, right? Red triangle for counter. So yeah, as for previously mentioned reasons, Torb is undivable himself, like basically undivable by most heroes. I would say that the flying dive heroes do give him a little trouble, but his turret plus himself completely shut down all the dive tanks. So it's very, very hard for them to deal with him. Again, the damage he puts out is nuts. Like, even someone like Ball, who's very tanky, Torb can burn through adaptive shields very, very quickly and prevents the ball from sticking around for very long. So yeah, Torb very, very strong against dive. Okay, Junkrat. Very interesting how KROW's labeled Junkrat. So number one, he counters poke. I don't know if I agree with this. I think that poke is honestly his weakest one to deal with. I'm not entirely sure what KROW's thinking here. So he definitely can off angle and flank and blow somebody up. His dives can be dangerous, but poke lineups tend to play far enough away that Junkrat can't easily dive into them. So I don't know that I would agree with this red triangle counter. I think I would say playable into as a poke hero in terms of synergy with his team, because his spam is dangerous. It helps burn down shields, which is the primary issue for poke heroes other than dive, which prevents them from getting picks. So he can blow up shields relatively easily. He does consistent damage. He can defend himself against divers. He can defend his teammates against divers, and so forth. So I would say orange triangle here over red triangle. Rush, yep. I think Junkrat can definitely brawl. Again, lots of really good close range damage. He can one-shot squishies at close range, which prevents him from staying close enough to help the tank out. He can constantly knock back the tank and literally like create space with concussive. He's very, very escape mobile, right? He can escape from tanks easily with concussive himself. Traps are dangerous against opposing tanks if they're not paying attention, or you can get behind them or above them. So yeah, I would say Junkrat good of rush. I would probably arguably even say Junkrat as default green checkmark for rush. Dive. So Junkrat counters dive. I think that's reasonable. I don't know that I would consider it a strong counter, but yeah, Junkrat does a lot of close range damage. He can knock away enemy divers. Trap's always something they didn't think about. He can rip tire to instantly blow them up. Which is not necessarily true against like a poke lineup where he has to get the tire to them. But if people are coming to me, I can pop my, especially low damage heroes like Winston, I can pop tire and just immediately blow them up, and then that shuts down the dive right away. So yeah, I think I agree with this red triangle for sure. Okay, second column of DPS. So number 1, Sojourn, poke, playable, or she's playable with all 3 comps. I guess I agree with this. I think her default would be poke. Okay, so this is why Soldier's kind of a weird hybrid hero. So let's kind of like talk through her kit and like why I'm hesitating here. So Soldier's left click, her SMG, right, the rapid fire gun that builds charge, is not a great weapon. It does good damage, but since you can't reliably hit and it spreads, it's not that helpful except other than really, really close range. So it's primarily used to build up her charge so she can use her railgun to like one-tap people, or nearly one-tap people. It's not actually one-tappable anymore. So that's like her default playstyle. However, her ability to slide and dive in, right, and her disruptor field is quite good. It does 200 damage over like 10 seconds or something like that. So it's not like so dangerous that someone will die from it, but it slows them down and it forces them to have to leave it, which is very important. So she's kind of like hard to read in game. At least I find it really hard to read. It's like whether or not she's going to advance or go back. She has a lot of options available to her. So she's very mobile, but she doesn't have any other defensive tools. She doesn't have any reliable form of damage. Very skill reliant. So in that sense, if you look at poke, well, in a poke lineup, she would be building charge off the tank and then right-clicking a squishy, right? In a rush lineup, she could be following her tank in, again, building charge off the tank, but then she might slide in and rush and then go after a squishy, or she might right click the tank, for example, and then put disruptor behind the tank to prevent the tank from escaping, something along those lines. For a dive lineup, she'd be staying out of LOS and then sliding and jumping in with her team, using disruptor to open the fight, and then immediately engaging somebody at close range with SMG and railgun. So same general gameplay loop, but like the precondition of like what you're doing to start the fight changes. So I would agree with this in general, like playable of all 3. What do I think she's typically? I think she's still typically played in poke lineups as her default. But I think she's viable into all of them. But I don't think she's strong into all of them either. I think Soldier has pretty low win rates across the board. So yeah, definitely kind of a tricky hero compared to early seasons where she was so strong. All right, Soldier. Interesting. So I would say definitely poke as his primary green checkmark, I would say here. So for Soldier, again, good medium-ish damage. Long range, his damage will fall off, but he does good medium range damage. He doesn't do as much close range damage other than with Helix as compared to a lot of other heroes. So he is vulnerable when he doesn't have Helix up. His heal station allows him to win a lot of 1v1s, which is great. So he often wants to be playing on off angles, which is where poke is really good. For Rush, I think that Soldier is pretty much not going to be played in the main body. I think Soldier's going to be playing on an off angle of the rush, which still works. It creates another angle for the enemy team to deal with. Again, he's not really diveable because of his heal station, so he can put a lot of pressure on the opposing team like that. So yeah, I agree. Both of these playable. But I would say poke is probably closer to the green check mark. Dive, Soldier can't dive at all. He has no vertical ability. His speed is like okay, but he can't really follow up on a particular timing. His long range damage is not great, so he still can't help as much as like an Ash would into a dive composition even. But so yeah, I would say not phenomenal with dive. Yeah, I would say not incompatible. All right, Widow, poke. Yeah, just poke. That's it. Yeah, she wants to stay at long range. She keeps firing until she gets a pick, and then she gets another pick, and then the fight's over. So yeah, that's it. That's all her gameplay. She doesn't synergize with rush. She doesn't synergize with dive. Oh, and like if you're hitting headshots, you synergize with anything. But inherently, you want your team to be based around playing for time, right? If I'm playing, Widow, I don't want to be running like Ryan Reaper with like and Lucio, like a one-way commitment. I want you to stay alive, like I'm playing like a Sigma, and give me time to hit headshots. Cassidy, versatile hero. So over here with Poke, his medium damage is good, right? Really, really good, actually. His long range damage is not great, but High Noon, surprisingly, actually can still kill people at long range fairly easily. So, yeah, I'd say Poke is pretty good. He's not particularly easy to dive, which is also good. Does a lot of burst damage. He's kind of like, he's both squishy but also dangerous, if that makes sense, because his right click combo does a lot of damage. So you have to respect that as tanks. His magnetic grenade can prevent people from escaping, help defend himself. So yeah, I agree with that. Playable in Poke. Rush, yep. So Cassidy's right click does so much damage. 300 is it 300 even, right? So his right click does like 300 damage over like 0.6 seconds, and then he can roll and then do it again. So he can do like 600 damage over like a second and a half, which is nuts. Burns down tanks crazy fast. Plus the magnetic grenade, that's like another like 720 ish. So yeah, lots of threat at close range. He can two tap people at all times. So yeah, he pretty much wants to get the enemy within his damage fall off range so that he doesn't have to worry about the two tap not working. So yeah, quite dangerous. And obviously, without a scope, he wants enemies to be closer. It's easier to land shots. And he's fairly durable. Has above average health. He has damage resistance on roll, which is also relatively low cooldown. So yeah, good in brawl / rush lineups. He's also often used as like kind of an anchor DPS that your whole team plays around because he can deal with any threat at any range, right? Close range, medium range, long range, like he can deal with pretty much everything other than like ultra long range snipers. Dive. I'm surprised KROW listed this as viable. I would say X here. Cassidy has no, like for the same reason as Soldier, Cassidy has no vertical mobility. He has no offensive mobility. It takes him forever to set up. Like when your team goes in, like other than defending your backline, he adds nothing here, which I feel like is quite a stretch to say that he's dive worthy. So I would say Red X here. Ash, basically same as Whittle, except she's semi-automatic and doesn't one-tap people. Yeah, just kills people at long range, wants people to stay at long range, doesn't like when people get up in her face. Yeah, doesn't synergize with rush, just doesn't do enough damage. Dynamite can be reasonably good, but she wants to be playing on an off angle on herself, and she doesn't. Again, she wants to slow down the fight, so rush no good, dive no good. Nah, yeah, pretty clear. Reaper, interesting. One of the only two heroes with double green check marks. Poke, obviously Reaper does 0 damage at long range, like literally like 1-5 DPS, like some tiny amount. So long range, not good for Reaper. Rush makes sense. Classically, I would say if there's the most green check mark, it would be in Rush. He wants to follow a tank in and just blow people up. Dive, still viable, so he finds like a spot to hide, waits for his team to engage, teleports in as the dive tank goes in, and then starts blowing people up. He uses Wraith Form to get out. Totally viable gameplay loop. I would say more playable than green checkmark though, but it's going to vary based on the comp and the map and a lot of other factors. But yeah, I mean definitely on the upper end of playable. Totally able to do this. Tracer, red triangles counters Poke. Yep, I would agree with this. Poke relies on heroes who are generally relatively easy to hit and stay in predictable spots. Neither one of those things apply to Tracer. She's very, very hard to hit, small hitbox, can take unusual routes, very sneaky, soft footsteps, so she can instantly get onto the Poke lineup, one-tap them or nearly one-tap them, pulse them, be super annoying, rewind takes her right back. Excellent duelist, which is what Poke heroes hate. So yeah, I mean lots of strong synergy, or rather anti-synergy with Poke heroes, just like basically attacks all of their weaknesses. The only thing she doesn't have is vertical mobility unless you learn all the Tracer jumps. But even then, like it's still pretty playable into most situations. Rush is okay. I mean, Tracer's a very versatile hero in general. So again, you're not going in with the tank like a Reaper or something. You're mostly just playing around the edges, waiting for your tank time to go in, and then because blinks are so flexible, you can go in at the same time, focus down whomever, whether that be a tank, DPS, whomever, like you can support, you can definitely help in that situation. You don't stick around very long, or you don't stick around well very long. So that does reduce some of the value. Like if there's a Moira on your team, you can't really accept the healing so much because you're in danger of getting one shot because you have low max health. But yeah, playable, definitely playable. Dive. Yep. Tracer's a classically thought of as a dive hero, right? You were looking for an opportunity to go in with your team, right? Do a blink or two. You set up, wait for your dive tank to go in, then you blink in, and then wreak havoc. Very very dangerous. You can stick around for quite a while with rewind, especially when you're playing against poke lineups because they don't necessarily do consistent damage to you. So you stay at 150 health forever, then you eat a headshot, you rewind, and then by that point you've won the fight. Sombra, anti-poke. So this is thought of as like the stealth Sombra playstyle where you just sneak around, you find a sniper, you walk up to them, and then you one-clip them with the gun. Even if you don't kill them, it forces a lot of resources. It prevents them from kind of doing their job. Very, very annoying, and then you translocate away. I don't know if this is considering the new Sombra or not, but let's just assume not for the moment. But yeah, I think that definitely strong against poke because poke needs heroes at long sight lines. A hero that's invisible is by definition always going to be fighting you at a range that you're not comfortable with. Rush, I think this is interesting. I would actually say Sombra is probably playable to this, especially the new Sombra, where you kind of like stay with your team and just apply damage pressure and situational hacks that mess up the opposing tank, especially if they're relying on certain cooldowns to stay alive. So I would actually say Orange Triangle playable with Sombra under Rush. Dive, excellent. Yep, Sombra's going to look for an opportunity to set up. You wait for the dive to go in, then you walk in, you kill a target, then you translocate out when you get in danger. Repeat over and over again. Synergizes really well with the dive playstyle. Final DPS, Bastion. So, Bastion in poke is okay. Yeah, I think for medium range poke, I understand where this is coming from. Again, you use the tank form, you blow people up, and then you want to hide. Your whole team, if they're playing poke, means that they're good at keeping the enemy team at bay, which prevents you from getting punished in your tank form. Rush. So Rush, super good. Bastion super good in this because you want a strong front line, again, that prevents you from getting punished, but also force the enemy team to kind of face off against them, or else your Rush tank just runs over them and kills them. If the enemy team can kite your Rush tank, then you're not going to be playing Rush anyway. So you get to go tank form, and then you get to just blow up anybody who's trying to fight your tank / other DPS, and then you just kind of win from there. Bastion super strong right now. Dive. Bastion, obviously, really bad dive hero. His basically no offensive mobility. His sticky bomb is mostly used for getting up to ledges, but not so much to move him forwards. And he doesn't want to be in a terribly forward position because that will make him vulnerable after assault form ends, and then the enemy team can chase him down. So no synergy with dive.